محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ثم ما بعد. So today is day 3 of our Ramadan Tajweed series. We're going to begin by just doing a recap of the last class, so a recap of day 2. In day 2, we began discussing the rule of idgham, which Imam al-Jamzuri rahimahullah says is the second rule out of the 4 rules related to the topic of noon sakin and tanween. And as we previously mentioned, noon sakin is just a noon with the little sukoon on it. So and tanween refers to anytime we see fathatain, dhammatain, or kasratain, the two fathas or the two dhammas or the two kasras after a letter. And so he tells us that there's 4 rules, and we're currently discussing the second rule, which is idgham. And we also mentioned that idgham literally translates to enter one thing into something else. In essence, what we're saying is that whenever idgham takes place, we're entering one letter into another letter, and we're going to combine them into one sound. And we also mentioned that there are 2 types of idgham with ghunna and idgham without ghunna. Now, the difference between both of them, we mentioned that in idgham with ghunna, we nasalize the sound while we're combining the 2 letters. So before we get into more details, one other thing we discussed last time was that there are 6 total letters of idgham: ya, ra, mim, lam, waw, and noon. There's a word that you can memorize called yarmalun, which basically just consists of all 6 of the letters. So now we'll move on. We also said that idgham with ghunna is a specific type of ghunna that's mentioned in the poem. Imam al-Jamzuri rahimahullah tells us, لكنها قسمان قسم يدغم فيه بغنة هي المعلمة, that there are 2 types of idgham, and the first type is idgham with ghunna, meaning that this is idgham where we combine 2 letters but at the same time extend the sound and nasalize it. And there are 4 letters of idgham with ghunna. So you mentioned that the 4 letters are in the word yanmu, like we see in the poem itself: ya, noon, mim, and waw. So what the Imam is basically telling us is that whenever we see a word that has a noon in it or tanween, and then right after it, any of these 4 letters show up, we not only do idgham and merge the 2 letters and put the first letter into the second letter, but at the same time, we're going to extend it and nasalize it. So I have some examples here. We discussed this last time. The first one is فَلَن نَزِيدَكُمْ. So here we have noon, and then right after that, there's another noon. And we know that noon is also one of the letters of idgham with ghunna. So what we do is when we connect them together, we're also going to extend it and nasalize it. The same thing in the next example. There's noon sakin followed by a ya. Ya is one of the 4 letters of idgham with ghunna. So what we're going to do is we're going to pronounce it as فَمَن يَعْمَلْ. Same thing with the next example, بَرْدًا وَلَا شَرَابًا, because here instead of having a noon sakin, we see a letter, and in this case it's a dal, and it has a tanween. And more specifically, the tanween in this case is the 2 fathas, fathatain. And then right after that, the letter of idgham with ghunna that we see is the letter waw. And so when we connect them, we have to extend the sound itself and nasalize it. So we say bardan wala sharaba. So that is idgham with ghunna. Now, there is a disclaimer that Imam al-Jamzuri rahimahullah tells us. He says, إِلَّا إِذَا كَانَ بِكَلْمَةٍ فَلَا تُدْغِمْ كَدُنْيَا ثُمَّ صِنْوَانٍ. There's a typo. I messed up, but it's supposed to say تدغم كدنيا ثم صنوان تلا. So the disclaimer is that if any of the letters of idgham with ghunna show up in the same word together, then there's no idgham in that situation. So what he's basically trying to tell us is that idgham takes place when there's two letters, different words coming together, not in the same letter. So the example he gives us is the word dunya. So in dunya, we see that there's noon with a second, followed by a ya, which is one of the four letters of idgham with gunna. But we're not going to do idgham here because it's in the same letter. So we're just going to pronounce it as it is, like dunya. And the same thing with the other word that he gave us, which is sinwan. So we're not going to nasalize it in any way. We're not going to combine it in any way. We're just going to pronounce it as it is. Kind of similar to the first letter, the first rule that we discussed in the first day of class, which was the rule of idhar. So just like that, we're just going to pronounce it as it is. We're not going to nasalize it. We're not going to prolong the sound, and we're not going to combine the two letters in any way. So we're just going to pronounce them as it is. So for example, dunya, sinwan, and bunyan. And this isn't a very common rule. This happens very, very rarely in the Quran. That's why like Imam al-Jamzuri rahimahullah himself only gives us two examples. This doesn't really happen very often in the Quran, but when it does happen, this is something to keep in mind. So with that, we're just going to take a short commercial break, and we'll be back right after that.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in his beloved book, and hold fast all together to the rope of Allah, and be not divided among yourselves. Ramadan is a month of worship, a month of growth, and a month where we all come together as a community. During this uncertain and stressful time, our centers may be empty, but our hearts are full. We are still connected as a community through our memories, our prayers, and our bond as brothers and sisters. This Ramadan, while we worship at home, let us continue to support the growth of our community center, MCMC. Now, more than ever, our institution needs us. It is time to come together. Support your masjid. Donate today.
Social distancing will change significantly how Muslims observe the holy month. Shut down mosques mean the faithful will no longer be able to gather together to engage in nightly prayer and to break fast at sunset. Those that rely on the food they receive at the mosque to break fast will also suffer.
Heading into work today. And it just hit me. I miss you. MCMC to me has always been my home away from home. It's the place where my love of Islam grew. It's the place that when I was at Rutgers and there was stress of work and stress of school, I could always rely on MCMC to be that place to give me a sense of peace, a sense of sukoon. And so with Ramadan coming in just a few days, it's hitting me that I miss my community more than ever. The iftars, the tarawih, the jummas, the lectures. Ramadan is a reminder of what community means, and MCMC has been the setting of that for so many reasons. So I was thinking, why shouldn't that still be the case? Why can't we make this the best Ramadan yet? Go to mcmcnj.org to learn how we'll do it. Every day, a reminder of what we stand for and an adhan to break our fast with, live on YouTube and Facebook. This Ramadan, let's have iftar together.
All right, we're back. So, like we mentioned, idgham with ghunnad has one disclaimer, and the disclaimer is that if noon and any of the letters of idgham are found in the same word, then there is no idgham. And this applies only to the noon second because there is never a situation where a tanween is in the middle of the word. This only applies to noon second. And so moving on, we're going to talk about the second type of idgham that Imam al-Jamzuri rahimahullah mentions in his poem. He says, وَالثَّانِي إِدْغَامٌ بِغَيْرِ غُنَّةٍ فِي اللَّامِ وَالرَّا ثُمَّ كَرِّ غُنَّةٍ. So the translation of this is that the second is idgham without gunna in lam and ra, and you with karri ranna. Karri ranna refers to the trilling of the trilling sound that you make whenever you roll an R. But in this case, it's not saying that we have to roll our R's really clearly. Instead, it's going to be very subtle. And we're going to go get into that in a sec. So idgham without ghanna is the second type of idgham. And the only two letters which this applies to is the letter lam and the letter ra. So the best way to understand this is by looking at the examples. The first example I have is with the lam. So we see that in this sentence, in this ayah, there's a noon second followed by a lam. So what we're going to say is كَلَّا لَئِن لَمْ يَنْتَهِ. So here we are doing idgham, and we are combining the two letters and putting the sound of one letter into the other letter. But the key difference is that it's without ghanna, meaning that there's no nasalization. There's no, we're not extending the sound in any way. We're just going to merge them together. That's it. So, كَلَّا لَئِن لَمْ يَنْتَهِ. And then the second example is فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. So, the Kadri Rana part that he mentions in his poem, it's referring to just making it clear that you're emphasizing the sound of the ra, but not too much. So فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. Right? So when we combine them, we do want to make it clear that we're combining it and we're doing a dgham on the ra, but we're just not going to like roll on it too much. So there's no rolling on the letter of the ra. We're just going to combine it and we're not going to extend it in any way. So فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. And same thing with the last example, مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ. And this is something that we see a lot in the Quran. So this is definitely something that as you're reciting, however amount you're reciting per day, just keep an eye out for this. This is something that definitely happens at least maybe a couple times per page or so. It's a very common rule of tajweed that happens a lot. And so one of the best ways we can try to implement this and try to learn whatever we discuss in this class is by just trying to actually implement it in our daily recitation. So with that, I conclude. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الصلاة خير من النوم الصلاة خير من النوم ألا صلوا في بيوتكم ألا صلوا